Hello and welcome to another episode of Threat Update. I'm Killian Englert, and joining me today is Kyle Roth. Kyle, how's it going?
Hey, Killian, great.
Great to hear. Thank you for joining. It's great to see you virtually again. I just got to see you finally after all this time in person at Black Hat last week, so that's exciting. For everybody watching, we have an exciting episode. It seems day after day, week after week, we're always facing new threats from ransomware. I know at Black Hat, Kyle and I saw so much about it. We had so many great conversations with people about what they're doing to detect ransomware and take steps to prevent ransomware. So on both sides of the coin. Now, the latest flavor that we've been seeing the rise of over the last couple days or week or so is the LockBit 2.0 ransomware variant. And I know, Kyle, this has been an area of interest for you and you've done some research. Would you mind sharing with the audience some of the research you've done on this particular variant?
Yeah, absolutely. So LockBit 2.0 is a ransomware campaign slash ransomware APT actor. Basically, operating as that ransomware as a service model. So things like affiliate programs are not unheard of. Ransomware for hire type things. And also, as we're seeing recently, kind of a newer development or tactic, if you will, is actually incentivizing insider threats, either through a payout or percentage cut of the bounty, that kind of thing. So definitely a new approach. We'll have to see how it fares.
Yeah, and this one follows the pattern that we're seeing with a lot of these, but as you mentioned, the really interesting aspect of it is the ransomware organization and their affiliates have kind of skipped the old tried and true infiltration methods, phishing or trying to compromise a device connected there, and they're simply going with cold, hard cash, or I guess cold, hard Bitcoin, probably,
Yeah.
to incentivize people with access to give over credentials for VPN connections, RDP credentials, or even just credentials for username and passwords to email systems as an entry point for the attackers to get into the organizations. It's an interesting and new tactic. It's really cutting to the chase. They typically look for these types of things, like exposed RDP servers on the internet, to try and brute force, or trying to hit the VPN concentrators either through stolen credentials from other breaches or brute force. So they're kind of simplifying their tactic and hoping to avoid maybe some of the detections associated with brute force attacks. Now, with that said, considering they're coming in from VPN or RDP potentially, Kyle, what are some of the ways that organizations can spot some of these attempts if a rogue employee were to give out their credentials?
Sure. I mean, obviously, if you've given out your credentials, the person that we're expecting at that point to access the account is likely going to be either that attacker, the attacker in this case, and likely chances are they may not have enough information yet to know, what normal activity looks like as far as logging in from certain geolocations. So definitely looking out for strange logins at odd hours of the night, kind of thing. Keeping that in mind, as well as sudden increases in access to sensitive data, huge thing to watch for as they kind of either the insider threat themselves or perhaps at this point, it's a separate actor. They still are going to need to do that recon, identify those files before even collection begins.
That's a great point. So really watching those VPN logins becomes pretty critical, especially with the unusual travel, potentially if they're in different geolocations or regions. Or even, and this is a good one that you brought up too, Kyle, watching that AD authentication telemetry to see where these accounts are logging in from, if they're coming in from like an external RDP server, for example. And I know that's something that you do in investigations for people all the time is track that down. Now, that's kind of good steps to detect this situation earlier on in the kill chain before the attacker necessarily gets too far into their process. In terms of the damage that can be done, one of our statistics that we have based on our own research is that on day one, really, that an average employee starts working, they typically have access to about 17 million sensitive files, and that's not even counting everything else, on day one, because typically the users are over provisioned or there's a lot of global access on the file servers themselves. So the blast radius of any rogue user, regardless, could potentially be devastating if they decided to, on that day one, instead of selling the rights, they could simply steal that data or exfiltrate it or give the credentials over if they wanted to. In terms of how organizations would go about addressing this potential blast radius, what are some tips that you have, or what have you seen organizations do that were successful to reduce that blast radius of a potentially rogue user?
So we're talking like post exploitation or pre, like essentially before the attack?
In this case, let's just assume that either we're dealing with just the rogue user, they've broken bad and they want to steal some things, or the attacker has gotten inside. How would businesses lock down that data that they have to kind of limit the access that those users would have?
Sure, yeah. I mean, definitely first and foremost, anything you do before this event, is definitely going to be, much more helpful than something trying to tackle, as this is going on. And definitely some of the steps you can take to kind of, as you said, to kind of reduce this blast radius are doing things like following the least privilege model, right? So when onboarding, not just giving them some global access group or whatever the case may be, having a strict onboarding process, making sure you're actually looking at that user's role, their responsibilities, and kind of determining what kind of access they should have, privilege to. So that's definitely a great way to start. Also, kind of just auditing or reevaluating your security groups that you have now. Checking out those group memberships, what their permissions are. Again, making sure that kind of try to follow that zero trust or least privilege model if you can. Yeah, definitely good steps to start.
No, that's huge, and you brought up kind of really two critical points. First and foremost, when people get added into groups, we want to make sure that the security groups are aligned to the data that they're giving access to and their single purpose. And I know you've seen it, and I've seen it in my career, where security groups get nested in other groups, and when you add somebody to one of them, there's a lot more potential that it could grant access to even what you necessarily realize. So reducing that to kind of single-use groups for particular data sets really key, and then just tackling global access, being able to just find where it is, ideally prioritize where it might be providing access to sensitive information, and then revoking that and kind of limiting that. If nothing else, that will reduce a lot of the risk. It won't completely eliminate it. There are additional steps, but those are kind of two really key ways that organizations would need to transform their environment to deal with the constantly evolving threats of ransomware and just insiders at that point.
Right.
So that's really good stuff. And thank you for the background, Kyle, on the LockBit. This is something I think we're going to see a lot more of in the coming weeks and months. I don't think we're getting away from it. So looking forward to more research you're doing on ransomware and other security topics. Appreciate that. And thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time out. If you like this content, please consider subscribing to the channel, throwing us a like. We definitely appreciate that. Or maybe even leaving a comment. Kyle and I definitely read those and appreciate them.
Definitely.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you all for watching. Look forward to talking to you again soon. Take care.
Yeah.